our meeting. So yeah, I've got to hit continue. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Arno Kanonen. I've known for over 40 years. Arno originally graduated, as indeed I did, in naval architecture, but he did so back in Finland, and then he went into his national service with the Finnish Navy, and then joined what was then, I think, Wärtsilä, and was involved in the first icebreaking basin work outside of the Soviet Union. And then shortly after that, he came to Canada and he worked in the icebreaking group at Dome Petroleum with his mentor, Ben Johansson, and he had a very successful career there. He shared a boss with me, Ken Croasdale, but Ken left and Arno became the manager of that group. And then after a while, he formed his own consulting company, AKAC, Arno Kanonen, Arctic Consultants, and he's done a lot of work throughout the world. And he's made a pile of cash out of oil and gas. And now he's going to redeem himself. He's going to tell us about what he's going to do to live in a sustainable home. So Arno, the floor is yours, and welcome.
Thank you, Alan, and welcome to everybody. I feel quite privileged that I get to share what I am doing, because when I started this Harmless Home business, I had no idea where the world is really going. So the presentation today that I'm going to give is quite a bit updated from the earlier versions, because we see that the more things change in the world, the more important it becomes to be more sustainable and more eco-sustainable and eco-footprint all around. So anyways, this is not about my career, it's about the harmless home. We call it harmless home. We can never be harm-free. So harmless was the best, closest word I could come up with as a title for this. And its target is to get as sustainable home and life as we within reason could do after the work career. Oops, there. So then one of the first questions that people ask me, why am I doing all this and why am I talking about all this? So being a naval architect, and I think what happened is that when I saw in my Arctic career, I was all over the world where there was ice. And I saw in a polar pack through the 45 years, or 40 years roughly, I was in the polar pack several times from different angles, including North Pole. 40% reduction of the polar ice during my whole career. It didn't even need to be scientific, but the icebreakers that I was on went there, they just flew through the ice towards the end of my career, where it was really trouble earlier. So when I saw this big change, I said, this is extremely fast on a global scale. So I said, okay, so let's see if I can now, after my career, stop burning all fossil fuels. That's one of the key contributors to the warming. So using, just a minute, sorry. Using all the lessons that I have learned during my Arctic career, when doing nothing to do with the Earth's eco-footprint or sustainability, that actually was teaching me a few things when I was doing my career. University never was teaching anything that I learned in my career that was relevant to this. Technology itself was universities, but I learned about calculated risk-taking, because I was a pioneer all my career, doing things that typically hadn't been done before. So in order to do something new, the only way that you can actually really take any meaningful step is to use calculated risk-taking, have a vision which is a bit beyond today's situation, and then take kind of calculated risk, because you don't know beforehand what you actually are going to start when you go into. But there's ways to do that, which I learned through my career. What I learned, I would say my father was a pioneer too, because he was really fighting in the Second World War. and he was one of the builders of the whole country of Finland, where I come from. And he already talked about global overconsumption and destroying and toxifying the nature. And climate wasn't so much talked about, but he already said that society does need to start to change around perhaps year 2000 to survive. In the 70s, that was already in the International Alliance organization that he said that. So that stuck in my mind. Bengt Johansson, who was my superior, who is an extremely innovative individual, and let me actually then also be quite open about what I was doing and developing new things. So he did highly functional major innovations, and I was very fortunate to be part of actually researching those innovations and how they've worked and what can be done differently and even better. Then much later, Elon Musk certainly knew electric car technology for general population. That was a pioneering job, big vision, and the first step. So steps were big risks actually. It's an example, leading by example. I believe that that's the only powerful way really to actually make change, is lead by example. Do something and show that it works well. And then people see it and believe it. There's way too much talk and not enough doing. And the other thing that Elon Musk was teaching me is that do something that people who can afford will want, because that is the easiest way to get funding for that sort of thing. When wealthy people want something, when they see that that is something good for them, that helps the change or accelerates change. So what is Harmless Home and Harmless? We call it Harmless Home, Harmless Life now. So our life's eco footprint in Canada typically is about, understand, on average about 4.5 Earth, but Earth can provide 4.5 times that per person. So low CO2 home, electric transportation, low toxicity, which is another thing that we are doing. Actually, we're toxifying everything, including ourselves. And then self-sufficiency in more, is an essential part of getting to more sustainable life. And self-sufficiency means, to me, more local rather than global, especially because global always involves a lot of transportation, and that is a very big CO2 footprint. When you bring half of the products, or maybe way more than that today from China, taking energy there and taking products back here is a huge eco footprint, CO2. Okay, so being pioneer, calculated risk-taking. The one thing that one has to say that new product is never perfect the first time around. But the one thing, and it is true with our house that I'm going to talk about now as well. But the other thing that is essential part of when you do something new is measure everything that you did achieve and you perhaps fell short and didn't achieve. So, because that's the best foundation for the next step. Okay, so targets, what were the targets? So we targeted net zero, will essentially better than passive home. Passive home is not actually net zero. Net zero means that you actually consume, you produce more energy than you consume. The CO2 is then balanced by that. But also for the house, embodied carbon during construction and operational carbon, heating and power consumption and maintenance of the house during its lifetime. Those two targeting to have as close to zero as possible, but zero is never possible because we are consuming it. Okay, one secrecy of our target of the home was also that the long lifetime, because we had built 2 different homes with my wife, and their lifetime before major maintenance, so they kind of even acceptable eco footprint, it only has a few tens of years, especially in the British Columbia West Coast, what they call it leaky condo syndrome. Mold formation requires a major upgrades or fixes pretty quickly around the house. So the long lifetime and low maintenance. And then the other thing that the home needs to be safe and comfortable for inhabitants. I mean, safe meaning toxicity, not meaning any physical in that. Our indoor air also tends to be more toxic than the outdoor, except for in big cities, perhaps. And then whatever we do, it needs to be built up by construction industry. There are lots of people with good ideas and excellent ideas to build a really low eco footprint home with sweat and tears and labor, hard labor. There's really eco-friendly houses, but it can't be produced in the massive scale. And then limited food production was another one. We didn't really define what is it, how much, and what we want to do, but that was another target, because that increases or decreases the transportation need for food and increases the sustainability of it. Okay, so our home was designed by Anderson Greenpan. Jack Anderson had been doing eco home designs for nearly all of his career, closer to 40 years. And before the decision was made how the house is going to be built, there were several exterior wall candidates by an upscale eco builder. And then after that, this Jack Anderson told me about just biofiber, which was totally new discovery. And I didn't need to do more than just a couple of hours check against the other alternatives. They said that this is by far the winning solution of any of these. Well, it never had been done, used for anything for house building. It was just a new innovation. So that was what was selected, calculated risk taking, I call it again. Then solar panels for home, we have quite a lot of those, and backup electric system, Tesla Powerwalls, and also 2 electric cars. We are self-sufficient on water, septic, and grow partially within the home own food, also can grow outside and put a greenhouse even there. Okay, construction schedule here is actually, one thing that is visible from this one is that actually the foundation of the house is concrete. So there's still too much concrete in the house because the innovation didn't include the possibility of building a house, the foundation out of these blocks. Anyways, contract to build the home was 2017, March 12th, building permit May 9th. That was conditional because the building inspector could not possibly get, or the engineer could not possibly give all the answers about the building envelope. That needed to be analyzed quite separately, but it was conditional building permit. First block delivery from Calgary, from Airdrie actually. This was driven with big truck set of blocks there, July 29th, and then the house was completed December 3rd, 2018. So it was a year and a half. It was really that excessively long construction time period. Okay, so what's the carbon footprint? It really is a small fraction only of typical home. The JPF wall carbon negative in construction, actually it's Just Biofiber is the company name. Just Biofiber company has a certificate from government for carbon negative construction company because it actually absorbs CO2 whilst these blocks cure. And total embodied carbon was significantly lower than traditionally built home by about 60% lower. And then the other thing that with the hemp, it's hemp and lime. It's part of that. These blocks is hemp and lime, and that hemp and lime mix is being used in Chinese wall as well as some of the pyramids. So they already knew that 500 plus year lifetime for this kind of construction solution. So, and it's a very small annual share of embodied carbon, less than 20% of that of the traditional home. So the operational carbon, that is used at the home, but actively we only burn wood when we absolutely need, because we don't typically need any. We have wood stove, 0.04 tons carbon, the number of loads that we put to our wood stove. Electricity from solar panels is a CO2 free for several decades. Nobody knows even the full lifetime of those panels yet, but they've been always claimed to have a shorter life than they have. Now, some 40-year-old panels are still well over 90% of the electricity coming. Then the JBF blocks, they absorb somewhere between 25 and 50 tons of CO2 from the air when the lime cures in that block during the 50 to 100 years first part. And then driving electric cars, the fuel-wise, not the production of the car itself, but the fuel-wise, it's so that we actually, all local driving we do with our own electricity. We only long distance driving we need to go and do anything else but absorb or use our solar panel power. So total lifetime carbon ballpark is about 10 to 15% of what today's typical homes have in British Columbia. So remember now that every province is different on this one because the home standards are quite different. So what is the energy efficiency of the home? Annual heating energy is about 400 megawatt hours per year. A passive house would allow it to be slightly over 5 megawatt hours per year. So it outperforms passive houses in terms of the energy efficiency. And our heating system is not very, very efficient. Regular heat pump, air to air, it doesn't really work without extra electric preheater when you go to temperature below 4 centigrade. So you couldn't use it from in your kind of provinces anywhere. Wintertime, it would be totally useless, this kind of heating system. In British Columbia, there's such a short time cold that it's okay. Geothermal heat would be justified. It could use about 20% less, save more than 20% of the energy that we use for heating our home. And the rest of the home consumes 5 megawatt hours per year. It is actually quite advanced in terms of the electric systems. It was a surprise to me how much electricity the house uses, because there's lots of systems which take quite a bit of energy, quite a bit freezing and fridge and cooking, and also a septic system has a constantly running pump and all the pumps that the house has for water and everything else, and air purification, the active systems. Anyways, electric water heater uses more than 1 megawatt hours per year, septic pump about more than 1 megawatt hours per year, lights, air purifiers, refrigerators. Yeah, see, here you see we have air purifiers. We have actually the high quality air purifiers which eliminate even viruses from the air, but it certainly was very efficient for what the power it uses. And IT and electronics using wireless alarm, cameras, etc. Okay, so the electricity is through solar panels, and PC hydro uses what is called net metering, which means that when we consume more than we produce, the meter goes one way, and when we produce more than we consume, then the meter goes the other way, and we feed back electricity to BC Hydro. So it's 15.6 kilowatt system, costed $50,000. The total production is over 20 megawatt hours per year. It's been about 21 or 22. Overproduction before all our consumption is somewhere between 5 and 7 megawatt hours. annual refund from BC Hydro, $300 to $500. They are stopping doing that refunding, so we are just giving them free energy then back. Tesla Powerwalls we had as backup system for electricity. So if BC Hydro is out, we still have 2 times 14 kilowatt hours. It covers up to 3 days normal needs. But for example, right now, the BC Hydro has been out. We are not at home now. It's been out nearly a week, and the Powerwalls are 98% because the solar panels keep filling the Powerwalls with electricity anyways. The summertime, it's endless backup. Heating system cannot be backed up. It requires more Powerwalls. Wastewater system. Our water system is one of the more complicated ones. You see picture, that wall is all the controls for the water and septic system there. And we have both rainwater and well water. We have a very low production well with a 2,000 gallon tank under garage and 2 rainwater tanks, 4,000 gallon under the garage too. And we can use untreated rainwater for greenhouse room and outdoor taps, and filtered well water or rainwater for our domestic use. And we have just basic electric hot water tank, not any high efficiency. And we have level 2 septic system, which means that it actually, we put practically clean water back to the nature. Composting, recycling, garbage collection is then they're the normal systems. Okay, now then harmless cars, electric cars, I call them harmless cars. 2 of these vehicles, we use about 5 megawatt hours per year, driving about 30,000, 15,000 each. And the cost to us, for comparable petrol car, the cost would be about 14 cents per kilometer. And we pay literally zero because we produce more electricity than we consume. Then all this electricity that we feed out our cars, electric cars, is free, or prepaid. So home charging cost is, oh, actually this is kind of funny. Where can I put these side pictures? Yeah, okay, here, okay. So we create 0 grams per kilometer when we drive locally, and when the range is about 500 kilometers per car, it's all local driving on the island is 0 CO2 on every scale, and 0 cost net out of pocket. The supercharging, as an example, Tesla Y, for example, in British Columbia, the electricity BC Hydro produces is 11 grams per kilowatt hour that the CO2 is produced there. So it's 1.6 grams per kilometer of CO2 driven a long distance. If you charge in Alberta, it's 610 grams per kilowatt hour based on the pretty much, so I think it's mostly called tar sands oil, but on average it is. So it would be 87 grams per kilometer if you charge in Alberta with Alberta electricity and electric car. You still get quite a bit of this CO2 out of it. In Saskatchewan, where it's coal-based, it's 112 grams per kilometer hour. But in comparison, BMW 3 iX petrol car, based on the driving, it creates 223 grams per kilometer. So the comparison is there. I can answer lots of questions if needed. Any questions? Just a minute, what happened here? Okay, so what have we proven with the Harmless Home so far? The CO footprint of our home and cars is sustainable within one Earth resources. We generate way more energy than we consume because of the solar panels on an annual basis. Wintertime, of course, we produce less, and sometimes overproduce. both home and cars result drastic drop in our CO2 creation in operation. Then the other thing that with this construction solution, it's a mold-free home. Actually, I didn't really tell about the wall blocks. The wall block is a single block that has no vapor barrier. It's got about R30 value, the insulation value, but what is even bigger is that they have really big thermal mass. It's about 10 inches thick, and the heat goes very slowly through those walls. So it's mold-free, no vapor barrier, no HRV in our house. That was one of the risks too, because it turns out that actually the heat recovery and ventilation, air exchange is needed. If you don't have HRV, and the inventor said that you can do without, you don't need it. And I said, no, that's not true. Because when you breathe oxygen in and CO2 out, you actually increase the CO2 inside the house more than it's good for people. Well, humidity control stays very well in range, in even the humid climate of British Columbia. I don't think any of the central provinces had any problem with these blocks. That very low VOC, volatile organic compounds, and low EMR, we also did our best to avoid wireless and many other aspects of the electric system that wouldn't radiate close to people, give the electromagnetic radiation. Then grow vegetables, fruit, etc. in greenhouse. We haven't done much of it yet, but we are starting. And it works actually amazingly well. We have inside the house a greenhouse room. And the surprising thing was that the price itself, not the first build like our house was, but the house to build with this system, it was lower than typical upscale home of similar size and quality. And very good sound insulation. It's the quietest home that we ever been to. And all this is achieved whilst we radically reduced cost of living and improved safety and quality of our lives. It's the real cost of living. We don't have monthly water bills or sewage bills, so we have a property tax and we have the, house insurance. Those are the biggest costs. Okay, so the harmless life, it's sustainable to our satisfaction. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't, if I would start from square one again, I wouldn't do it the same, I would do it much better. But anyways, already it is pretty good. Living at home is very sustainable. Transportation on American continent is quite sustainable. Continued ability to live safely in case of earthquake, fire, or other recognized natural disaster in power outages, etc. It's very good. Actually, one thing I didn't mention here, it is actually fireproof. So, because the blocks contain lime, and if you try to burn the lime, it actually releases CO2, which is a fire extinguisher. So the blocks don't burn, period. It's freedom from toxins, which is one of the bigger lessons. For example, I've been snoring tens of years, and when you put the air purifier in our bedroom, I stopped snoring entirely. So that was a total big surprise to both my wife and myself. It kind of testifies that something about the air quality in the house has been the reason of my snoring. And one of the biggest unknowns today is the EMR, because now, whether you like it, anybody likes it or not, but electric cars bring another EMR and remote communication, and 5G will do a lot more of that. So the only thing that is not satisfying to us, our house is an example of what can be done, what is way too big to fit within the Earth resources, because it's only 2 people living there in that house. It's too big for that, to meet that requirement. So then we say, okay, so next step is, well, so how can we now help the future forward using what we had done and learned from this house? So for that, I said, well, how does our society act to achieve change? Typically, the society on a larger scale use these kind of learned models, how to stepwise improve existing solutions. To me, those are very slow and only fractional improvements that are achieved that way. For example, in British Columbia, the building code has step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And step 1, I can't remember the exact percentages, but typically the step 5 is a passive house. So the building industry goes from step 0 to 1 and is proud, and then to 2 and is proud again about the improvement, and 3 and 4, 5, and eventually, but it takes years and years and years. Our house went straight to step 5. So to me, the change, it's frustrating to me to see that the society is so conservative about change. Change is nearly impossible in any meaningful way. And the other thing that is happening in the society, of course, it is the biggest industries that the governments do talk about and really agree, they agree to fund the biggest companies to change themselves in the future. But that does lead to slowest possible change. Main arguments include retaining existing jobs whilst increasing, at least retaining earnings. So change is very difficult if it is out of anybody's pocket. And if it causes any kind of upset to the labor situation. And the other thing that happens when the big companies get funding, it's only a small subsector that is being studied at the time. It's not overall improvement. The next point down below is there's no credible measure established for overall improvements on a larger scale. And in my mind, what I started with was, I said the energy target goal clearly, and then measured everything against that in our home, and it's still going to be measured more. And when we don't quite achieve everything, at least there's a track record to track the progress towards what is targeted. Not on a small scale, but on the really global scale. And the other that also kind of political system has a challenge with is that governing parties need to reward voters to get re-elected. So the cycle of electing them and having the same people or the same parties even do the things they believe in is very difficult, because you can't reward voters by doing something radically new and claim the fame for that. That's very difficult. And now, today, I must say, stopping climate change is not enough. Sustainable life for humans does include stopping climate change too. But all living creatures and nature can only be retained when overconsumption is stopped. That doesn't necessarily, climate change doesn't necessarily measure overconsumption. Toxification of air, water, food, and nature, that can help climate change topics, but that's way beyond. Global leadership must be motivated by our needs. Otherwise, there's no leadership towards the right orientation. And in my mind, democracy needs to be retained in order to actually retain open discussion and based on real science. Today, it's very much propaganda rather than science. Science is it's not even allowed to discuss anything but what the official words are in many areas. Censorship pretty much eliminates the possibility on a global scale, on larger scale, on native or regional scale even, to make meaningful big change. But the biggest challenge in my mind is that humankind, how can the greed and control by the wealthiest people and organizations and politically motivated largest world-leading countries, how can they be gotten on board? It doesn't really make any difference what one individual or one family or even one small region does. It doesn't get scaled somehow to the bigger scale. Okay, so one final slide here. So what about our Harmless Home? There's a master's thesis being done about the eco footprint of the home. And I do believe that when the house has been measured in terms of the heat transfer as humidity transfer through the walls, in terms of also the eco footprint of embodied and operational carbon. So when those are analyzed, then it's possible to use the real data as a measure stick, how good this is, and then how it can be further improved. And then the other thing that takes typically it actually sadly takes a long time to get to mass production. First of all, blocks need to get fully into the building system code. Otherwise, it's very complicated engineering. Wherever it goes to a new place, a new region, it needs to be started from square one nearly. So, and each region and country needs to have their own. No country follows any other country's codes and any of that. And then one fact is that long transportation distance of blocks or any construction materials increases embodied carbon, which is kind of counters the eco justifications. The way that I believe that changes that when the price is low enough, eco footprint and building and operating costs are so low that people demand this kind of solution. So when we calculate our eco footprint and the costs of living in the house over longer term, that hopefully will become a meaningful measure for the future to be able to change for better, for more sustainable. The future, I think today is I'd say a couple of words only. One is that the fact that the world is kind of in a chaos because of this pandemic here, future is very difficult to predict, but it certainly is because of the kind of complicated situation in the world. Self-sustainability becomes I think it will start to play a bigger role in people's choices. They don't want to depend on systems that can fail. Like now there's been power line, oil supply line failed and power system been failing. And they talk about the perfect storm of shortages. And towards that, this kind of self-sustaining life is very well justified. Let's see. That was the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Arno. I think you're willing to take questions. I think you want to take questions. So I think for individuals that have joined us, you need to open your own mic. Hugh, you don't have control of their mic, right? Everybody can just speak as they feel.
Yes, I think everybody can unmute their own mic.
Right.
Maybe we should just try with one individual and just check that that's functioning.
Okay.
Any volunteer?
Hello.
Baji.
Yes. I'm Arno. Great presentation. If I'm building a house now, yes, I'll definitely go for that. Do you have any suggestions or the builder has anything for existing houses other than these solar panels and the heat pumps? Can these blocks be added to existing houses? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what you're really asking.
Yeah, what I'm asking is for existing houses, can these, apart from these solar panels and the heat pumps, anything can be added with these blocks to reduce, conserve heat, energy?
Yeah, yes, I mean, existing house, it would mean I got hard time seeing that easy to do, because you need to rebuild. I mean, if you want to add these blocks to an existing wall, that's an expensive undertaking.
Okay.
And the blocks are already quite a thick wall itself, and that itself takes care of the humidity flow, insulation, sound insulation too. But of course, the blocks themselves will lower your cost and reduce some of the problems.
Okay.
Now, Arno, do you know, does JBF have a worldwide patent on the blocks?
Yes, there's many patents actually, but I mean, what's going on right now is that they are negotiating funding for first major. I mean, first of all, they are in the finishing stages. It takes a long time for them to get all of this to fully into the building code.
Right.
One of the biggest challenges is that in the West Coast, probably not so much in the central provinces of West Coast, earthquake tolerance is something that is very expensive to measure and analyze.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been fully done. So we do know that our house is earthquake proof sufficiently for the code, but we don't know exactly how much it can take.
Right. Well, you're
But
saying
in order to put it to fully building code, it needs to be proven by measurements and analysis, which is according to whichever region is being dealt with, or country at least. I think every province in Canada has a different set of rules.
well, you're sitting on top of a huge rock, so if that moves, we're all in big trouble.
Yeah.
What about the other properties of the blocks with the fireproofing? They would have been done in independent lab tests. Their durability, their soundproofness.
Yes. It's. I mean, the soundproofness. What was it? I think it was close to 80 decibel. It was not quite, but it was. It's like when the blocks themselves insulate as much sound as nearly all when the freight train goes by. But it's not through the walls that the sound goes. It goes through the windows to a degree, anyways.
Yeah.
But it's and the humidity. Both the R value and the humidity flow is measured through the blocks. So we know on north wall and inside and outside there's an energy and humidity measurement system. So we know that in terms of lifetime of the blocks, I mean they get it's kind of interesting. The first year you can, when you hammer a nail in, you can pull it out with your fingers. The second year, no. A third year, you got hard times even hammering a nail into the wall. So they get limestone. They turn practically to limestone.
So I mean, one of the drawbacks that you mentioned was just that there's only yourself and Linda occupying the space, but the concept that seemed to lend itself to combine living, like building a condominium with that sort of construction.
Yeah, see, this
could it take several floors now? Could it go up 4 or 5 floors?
Yeah, that's a bigger challenge in British Columbia, the multi-story building, because the earthquake tests are required before you can get I mean, our house is shallow enough, no problem. But it's a very good for condo, because if you put the JBF wall between two condos, you don't hear anything from one unit to the next.
Right.
That's really brilliant, that part.
Yeah, Alan, Stuart Middleton has a question, so I'm going to try and manage.
I should be doing that too, Hugh, but go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, I have a, first of all, Arno, thank you very much for the presentation. It's always nice when someone is pioneering something. I have a little question on the JBF blocks. They are absorbing CO2, as you said, and you take a credit for that in the balance. However, the reason they're able to absorb CO2 is the fact that somewhere in the past, someone calcined some limestone and drove off that CO2 into the atmosphere. So they're actually, they never absorb as much CO2 as was driven into the atmosphere in their production. I would welcome your comments.
Yeah, that's a. I think if you look at into the, you're right. It's the lime is extracted from like I think it comes from the EXO in the for our house.
Yeah.
So yes, the history.
Yeah,
Definitely, you can't.
So the originally it was driven off in Alberta, but now you're consuming them in BC. So maybe
Yes, I mean there's I mean the one biggest volume of that block is hemp. The hemp herd. What is when you take the decorticate and take the stem of the hemp, which is not used for much else, except for you can actually make hemp clothing these days. That's one of the fastest growing products. There's quite a few hemp growers these days who do grow hemp even in British Columbia. And the biggest price of this decorticator, which separates the hemp from the, I mean that takes the stem so that uses it for this. I mean, one of the things is that the blocks, I think the lifetime is, nobody knows why the lifetime would end even. I mean, it's when you look at the Egyptian pyramids and they have limestone, I mean, they hemp-based limestones. That is, they've been there as a Chinese wall many, many, many hundreds of years, or thousands. So I don't think the exterior wall will kind of be the time limit for the house, future of the house. So the exterior walls, whatever you do interior is different, maybe.
Angus has a question for you.
Hi, Arno. Fantastic presentation. Thank you very much. Really enjoy hearing about these kinds of projects around the world. I guess a couple of questions. One an actual question and the other maybe just for comments. The first question is, one of the things you mentioned towards the end there was, if you were doing it again, you'd probably do one or two different things to do it better. I wonder if you could tell us maybe one of the main things that might come to mind that you think you would do here to improve things if you were doing it again?
Yeah, there's okay. Well, one thing first of all, I said that there's way too much concrete in our house still because the foundation is. Now the inventor invented also. You can't put this JBS, just biofiber blocks, underground because they would suck humidity in there. And he invented a soil foam block, which has a structural frame which is identical to what's inside these biofiber blocks for foundation. So I definitely would do that because that can be used underground. So that would eliminate more concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that our house still has wooden frames for the windows and doors.
Yeah.
They actually now have eliminated wood in those places as well. So the less there's exterior wood exposed, the longer the lifetime becomes, because it's very difficult to prevent the wood from, at some level, aging.
Yeah. And I guess my second question really is, it's not a specific thing relative to this house, I suppose. It's just to see if it was something you thought about or not. One of the other things we hear about trying to reduce our impact on the planet, something that particularly has piqued my interest recently is, in part, yes, it's about reducing our CO2 footprint and so on and so forth, but they're finding that really striking a balance with nature, and in particular, when you look at biodiversity loss and trying to retain some of that as we humans exist on the planet, seems to help the planet take care of itself and therefore take care of us. You know, we're kind of almost integral to that. I wonder if you've any thoughts on when putting something like this in place, how you help retain, improve, accommodate biodiversity as part of trying to keep the house eco-friendly, keep the house green. Was it something
Yeah.
you thought about at all or have thought about since?
No, I mean, the biodiversity is beyond the house itself, I would say. I mean, I can see one of the things. I think what's inside the house is still there's a lot of stuff. Once your house is built, you start filling it with a lot of stuff, which is not very kind of, I mean, they can be long lasting, but they are not helpful in terms
I was thinking, I mean, I know people previously have spoken about like grass roofs and growing flowers on the roofs and these sort of ideas and so on. I just, like I said, I just wondered if it's something you'd encountered at all in the plan.
That you mean that part of it? Yeah, I mean, to me, the solar panels are such an obvious thing. I mean, we thought about other solutions, but we have metal roof and solar panels because solar panels fit very well into metal roof, but also because we can collect rainwater from the metal roof. So that makes us very self-sustainable very, very, very easily, and we have lots and lots of extra water left. The thing about, like you talk about, for example, growing things on the roof, like, and have goats on roof, whatever you want. You might get your own steak. I mean,
Yeah.
goat cheese or whatever. I never thought about that stuff, but yes, I mean, you can go to Coombs here on the island. You can see that is something that actually does work. And
yeah, I've seen the place at Coombs. No, I just wondered. I mean, I think I'd probably go the same way you have with the solar panels. I think trying to reduce the dependency on the grid and renewable energy into your house and to propel your transportation and stuff probably the way to go. And same with the water, the collection on the roof. You know, you're not having to have industrially treated water mains water supplied to the house that has a bigger impact.
Yeah.
So yes, that reduces all the CO2 and the chemical usage and stuff up the pipeline, but it probably also reduces the impact on, I'd imagine it reduces the impact on the wild, on the nature and on the biodiversity somewhere remote to you, because you're not asking people to produce these things to support your house.
Yeah, I think so. But one thing I forgot to mention about the roof part is, I mean, honestly, people used to say that solar panels don't pay for themselves. I said, just a minute. The whole $50,000 for the solar panel system that we installed pays itself simply by the savings of the car fuel in 13 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just something changed. I mean, it's not the first house where we have solar panels, and first house was not nearly as good, but this really opened my eyes. Said, hey, just a minute. This is something that's the best investment I could ever think of.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Arno.
You're most welcome. But there's many other things one can improve, though. I mean,
well, beyond the house, when you look at your transportation, you've gone for fully electric vehicles, and there are a lot of people feel that hybrids would be a better approach because you could have a smaller electrical component and be less demanding, say, for lithium or whatever else, your cobalt, whatever you're going to use in the batteries. And yet the eco footprint wouldn't be that different. I don't know whether you thought about that. I mean, your system, you're getting free electricity, but that wouldn't necessarily be everybody's situation, as you pointed out.
No, it might not be, but I mean, to me, electric car, that's a different discussion. That can expand very expensive discussion. I think when you get the hybrid, you get the more complicated engineering piece.
Oh, for sure.
Higher maintenance, lower lifetime, all kinds of, you carry complicated system that is really high maintenance. Electric cars, actually, we're quite surprised. We had our first one 2012, and since then we only driven electric. And every lesson that we learned about those, the only lesson that was a bit of a challenge was charging for long distance driving, because the range wasn't so good earlier. But now that all has gone, and the maintenance is actually practically zero. Most expensive part is tires.
So Arno, going back to your home again and thinking about your other observations about the need for cultural shifts, either in a community or across the country or whatever. Do people out locally in Suk, do they view you as a crank living in a house like this? Or are you getting a lot of good reception from your neighbors and from other people about this whole concept?
Yes, we have. This has been publicized quite extensively in British Columbia, and even my internet pages have over 700 followers. and there's we had probably more than 200 people visit the house during and mostly during construction.
Yeah.
And so it's very well known, the house it's such. And it's not the only one. There's two others. One was just finished in Victoria region, and there's another one on Cortes Island.
Okay.
And the one which is finished in Beaver Lake, that's just north of Victoria, is it's more, what would I say? It's taken the next steps in. They have foundation soil foam blocks, and they have some other improvements beyond what we have.
So do you see yourself as a frontiersman?
Well, it's like I said, that it's my second nature, because in my whole career I used to do things that hadn't been done before. Everything else is a little boring on that scale.
Any other questions for Arno? We're coming up here locally to right on 8 o'clock, Arno, and
Yeah.
Other people, well, they'll have your email address if they want to follow up.
Yeah, please, no problem. I gladly communicate. Actually, one thing I forgot to mention is that one of the things I should have mentioned is that the traditional construction had a lot of waste. I can't believe how many loads of waste is carried away from home construction sites.
Yeah.
There's zero waste from these blocks. It's got a structural frame inside, and it's got the hemp and lime is the main mass. So the main volume, you can actually grind it and put it to your soil. It's good alkaline soil enhancer. And the structural frames are ground and reused for more structural frames.
There you go.
So zero waste for that part of the home.
Well, I'm going to thank you on behalf of our group for the presentation. Probably thank you on behalf of civilization for making the effort and drawing attention to it. What they do as a group, Arno, and thanking you is, well, they'll send you a certificate. You will send you a certificate, but we also make a donation to a group called Operation Eyesight on your behalf, and it helps some folk get either some help with their eyesight or maybe even total healing, depending on their circumstance. So I'm sure you'll be happy to have that done in your name.
Yeah, well, I don't expect anything, but I really appreciate.
Thanks very much indeed. So I think we're finished, Hugh, unless you've got some comments about what's next, or I wonder, I don't think Nigel was able to join us tonight. And I thought, because Nigel spent his whole career making bricks and testing them, so I thought he'd be there. Hugh, did you have any closing comment?
Only to thank Arno very, very much, and thank you all of the people who dialed in and listened. Appreciate it. We will be trying to put this up on the website, and we'll continue to email you regarding future presentations. So once again, thank you very much, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you. And whatever I can do to support you guys or whatever questions you have, don't hesitate.
Thanks very much, Arno. Take care. Stay safe.
Yeah,
Stay
you
safe,
too.
everyone.
Good
And
night.
Good
thanks
night.
for the interest.